You can tell who a person really is by what they do when no one is watching. The voice begins low and steady as the late afternoon sun hangs over a stretch of highway just outside a quiet American town. Heat rippling above the asphalt. Engines rushing past like no one has time to stop. And on the shoulder stands Charlotte Hayes, her heels slightly sinking into gravel. One hand pressed against the hood of a silent luxury car that shouldn't have failed her. Not here, not today, her jaw tight. Her patience thinner than the signal on her phone. 3 cars pass, then 5, then 10. Each one choosing speed over kindness. Each one proving something she already believed about the world, until a faded pickup truck slows down, hesitates, and finally pulls over behind her, the engine coughing once before settling, and out steps Ethan Cole, sleeves rolled, hands marked by honest work, eyes calm in a way that doesn't ask for attention. Car trouble. He says, simple, direct, no performance. Charlotte barely glances at him before reaching in her bag, pulling out cash like it's the only language that matters. Just fix it, she says, her tone clipped, efficient, used to being obeyed. Ethan looks at the money, then at the engine, then back at her, and quietly shakes his head. Let me take a look first, he replies, already moving, already choosing action over pride. She exhales sharply, annoyed, watching him like he's wasting her time, but he doesn't rush, doesn't explain, just opens the hood and studies the machine like it's something worth understanding. Not conquering, the traffic roars by, wind brushing against them, carrying dust and the faint scent of hot rubber. And for a moment, the world narrows to the quiet rhythm of his hands. 3 quick adjustments, 1 steady turn, a pause. Then the engine hums back to life, smooth, effortless, like it never broke at all. Charlotte blinks, caught off guard, her fingers tightening slightly around the money she's still holding. That's it? She asks, disbelief slipping into her voice. Ethan closes the hood gently, wipes his hands on a worn cloth, and nods once. That's it, he says, no smile, no expectation, just quiet certainty. She stepped closer, studying him now, really looking for the first time. Why help me? She asks, the question sharper than she intends, because in her world, nothing comes without a price. Ethan meets her gaze for just a second, steady, unshaken, because someone should, he says, and then he turns, walking back to his truck without reaching for the money, without asking for a name, without leaving anything behind except a silence she doesn't understand. And as he drives away, disappearing into the flow of traffic, Charlotte stands there beside her perfectly running car, surrounded by noise, by movement, by everything she owns, and for the first time in years, none of it feels like enough. The city lights of Manhattan stretched across the night like a promise that never needed to be explained. Glass towers reflecting power, wealth, and control. And at the very top of one of them, Charlotte Hayes stepped out of a private elevator into a penthouse office that overlooked the Hudson River, heels clicking sharply against polished marble as assistants straightened their posture the moment she entered. Reschedule the board call, she said without slowing down. Push it to tomorrow morning, her voice precise, practiced, unquestioned. 3 executives followed behind her, tablets in hand, ready to brief, ready to impress. But Charlotte did not hear them. Not really, because something quieter kept replaying in her mind, something that did not belong in this world of contracts and numbers. A man who had looked at her without recognition, without calculation, without need. Ms. Hayes, the investors are waiting on your approval. One of them said, trying to pull her back. She stopped, just for a second, her reflection staring back at her from the glass wall, composed, flawless, powerful, and yet something in her expression felt unsettled. Send them the revised terms, she replied, turning away, her tone steady again, but the rhythm was off, just slightly, like a song missing a note. Minutes later, she stood alone, the city humming beneath her, distant sirens, the low rush of traffic, the quiet hum of climate control filling the room. She set her phone down on the desk and exhaled slowly, longer than usual, her fingers brushing against the edge of the glass. Because someone should, she whispered, the words sounding foreign in a place where everything had a price, everything had a reason. She had built her life on that truth, every deal negotiated, every partnership calculated, every kindness measured against return. but there had been no negotiation on that. Roadside. No leverage, no advantage, just action. Simple and unguarded. She turned, pacing once then twice, her heels softer now against the floor, the silence growing heavier instead of lighter. She picked up her phone again, scrolling through contacts, assistants, board members, advisors, people who would answer immediately, people who needed her, and yet none of them were the one person she suddenly could not forget. "Find him," she said abruptly, her voice cutting through the quiet as she pressed a call. Her head of security answered on the second ring. "Excuse me?" "The man from this afternoon," Charlotte said, her tone controlled but firm. "The highway just outside town. I want his name." A pause, slight confusion on the other end. "Do we have any identifying information?" Charlotte closed her eyes briefly, replaying the moment. The truck, the worn cloth in his hand, the way he had not even looked at the money. "No," she said softly, and that word hung heavier than any billion-dollar decision she had ever made. No last name, no business card, no digital trace, just a memory, just a feeling she could not quantify. The man on the line hesitated. "We can try traffic cameras, nearby businesses. It might take time." Charlotte opened her eyes again, looking out over the city that usually bent to her will. "Take whatever time you need," she said, quieter now, but more certain than before, because for the first time, she was not searching for leverage, not searching for advantage. She was searching for something she did not fully understand, something that could not be bought. And as she ended the call, the room fell into a stillness that felt unfamiliar, not empty, not cold, but expectant, like the quiet before something changes, and far from the glass. Towers and polished floors, in a small garage lit by a single flickering bulb. Ethan Cole wiped his hands clean, unaware that somewhere miles away, a woman who owned everything had just realized she had found something she could not replace. The next morning arrived quietly, the kind of early light that slips through cracked blinds and settles gently on worn wood floors, and inside a small garage on the edge of town. Ethan Cole was already at work, sleeves rolled, a cup of black coffee cooling on a metal shelf beside him, the faint hum of a radio, filling the space with old country music that no one really listened to anymore. "You are here early again," a voice called out from behind him, his co-worker Mike stepping in with a yawn and a paper bag in hand. "Somebody has to keep this place running." Ethan replied, not looking up, his voice calm, steady, like it carried no weight beyond the moment. Mike chuckled, setting the bag down. "You ever think about charging more for your time?" he asked, half joking, half serious. Ethan tightened a bolt, paused, then shook his head slightly. "People pay what they can," he said, simple, final. Mike leaned against the workbench, watching him for a second longer than usual, like he wanted to argue, but did not, because there was something about Ethan that made arguments feel unnecessary outside. A school bus rumbled past, brakes hissing, and Ethan glanced at the clock on the wall, his movements slowing just a fraction. "You picking her up today?" Mike asked, softer now. Ethan nodded. "Same as always," he replied, and for a brief moment, something warmer passed through his eyes, something quieter than pride, stronger than routine, the kind of love that does not ask to be seen, just lived miles away, inside a glass conference room high above the city. Charlotte Hayes stood at the head of a long table, executives lined on either side, screens glowing with numbers, projections, decisions worth millions. "We move forward with the acquisition," she said, her voice controlled, precise. 3 questions came at once, sharp, calculated. What about the risk exposure? What about the timeline? What about the public response? Charlotte answered each one without hesitation, her tone measured, confident, every word landing exactly where it needed to. But beneath the surface, something was off rhythm, like her mind was working in 2 places at once. Her assistant stepped closer, whispering, "We have an update." Charlotte's gaze shifted just slightly. "Not now," she said, but the assistant did not move. "It is about the man," she added quietly. And that was enough. Charlotte paused, just long enough for the room to notice. Then she straightened. "Take 5 minutes," she said, turning away from the table, heels softer now against the floor as she stepped into the hallway, the door closing behind her with a quiet click. "What do you have?" she asked, her voice lower, more focused. The assistant handed her a tablet, surveillance stills, A grainy image of a pickup truck, a timestamp, a location. We traced the vehicle leaving the highway, she explained. It led to a repair shop just outside town. Charlotte stared at the screen, her fingers tightening slightly around the edge. The image was not clear, but it was enough to feel real, enough to make the memory sharpen instead of fade. Name? She asked. The assistant hesitated. Not confirmed yet, Charlotte nodded. Once slow, deliberate. Prepare the car, she said, handing the tablet back. Cancel my afternoon. The assistant blinked, surprised. You have a meeting with cancel it, Charlotte repeated, not louder but final, the kind of tone that does not need to rise to be obeyed. And as she walked back toward the conference room, the city stretched out beneath her again, powerful, predictable, entirely within her control. But for the first time, control did not feel like the goal it felt like. Something she was willing to step away from. And back in the garage, Ethan wiped his hands and reached for his coffee, unaware that somewhere between steel towers and silent highways, a decision had just been made, one that would bring two completely different worlds together again, not by chance this time, but by choice. You drove all the way out here for a man you cannot even name. The voice settles in, calm and observant, as a black sedan glides off the main road and onto a quieter stretch lined with small businesses, faded signs, and gravel lots. The kind of place that does not appear on corporate maps. The kind of place where things are fixed, not replaced. And inside the car, Charlotte Hayes sits in silence, her fingers resting lightly against her knee. Not tapping, not impatient, just waiting. Something she has not done in years. This is the location, her driver says, pulling to a slow stop outside a modest garage, the paint chipped, the sign slightly crooked, a single light glowing inside despite the bright afternoon sun. Charlotte looks through the window, taking in every detail, the worn door, the stacked tires, the quiet that feels almost intentional. I will wait here, the driver adds, but she is already reaching for the handle. No, she says softly, you will not. And with that, she steps out, her heels meeting gravel with a sound that feels too sharp for this place, too precise. The air smells faintly of oil and warm metal. And for a moment, she just stands there adjusting to a world that does not move at her pace. Inside, Ethan Cole is bent over an engine, hands steady, focus complete, the radio playing low in the background. Something old, something familiar. You miss a spot, Mike joked from across the room, tossing a rag toward him. Ethan catches it without looking, a small movement practiced. Effortless. I will get it, he replies, calm as ever. And then the door creaks open. The sound soft but noticeable. Both men glance up, and there she is, standing in the doorway like she does not belong and yet refuses to step back. Charlotte Hayes, composed, poised, but quieter than before, like the world outside has been turned down just for this moment. Can I help you? Mike asks first, wiping his hands, stepping forward. But Charlotte's eyes are not on him. They're on Ethan, steady, searching, like she is confirming something only she can see. I'm looking for someone, she says, her voice measured, but softer than it was on that roadside. Ethan straightens slowly, recognizing her before he even fully looks up. Not surprised, not impressed, just aware. You found him, he says simply, and the words land without weight, without expectation. Just truth, Mike. Glances between them, sensing something he cannot name, then quietly steps back, giving space without being asked. Charlotte takes a step forward, her heels slower now, careful on the uneven ground. You left, she says, not accusing, just stating. Ethan nods once. The car was fixed, he replies. And there it is again, that same quiet logic that does not bend to her world. And the money, she presses, her hand tightening slightly around the edge of her purse. Ethan meets her gaze, steady, unshaken. You needed help, not a bill, he says, and for a second, the garage feels smaller, quieter, like even the radio has faded into the background. Charlotte exhales slowly, the tension in her shoulders shifting, not gone, but changing. That is not how the world works, she says, almost to herself. Ethan shrugs lightly, turning back toward the engine. Maybe not your world, he replies, picking up his tools again. The conversation already finished in his mind, but not in hers, not even close, because for the first time, Charlotte Hayes stands in a place where her power does not lead, her money does not speak, and her presence does not change the outcome. And in that quiet garage, surrounded by simple things and steady hands, she realizes something she has never had to face before, that respect cannot be demanded. It can only be earned. And for the first time, she does not know how. Power can open doors, but it cannot make someone stay. The voice continues, steady and reflective, as the quiet hum of the garage settles into a rhythm again. Tools clinking softly, the faint buzz of the overhead light, and Charlotte Hayes stands there, still, watching a man who has already moved on from her presence, as if it never carried weight to begin with. "You are very calm," she says after a moment. Her voice no longer sharp, no longer commanding, just curious. Ethan does not look up. Immediately, tightening a bolt, wiping his hands, finishing what he started before answering, "There is no reason not to be," he replies, simple, grounded. Charlotte steps closer, her heels softer now, more careful on the concrete floor. "Most people would have taken the money," she adds, searching for something that explains him, something that fits into the rules she understands. Ethan finally glances at her, not long, just enough. "Most people are trying to prove something," he says then. Returns to his work, and that answer lingers, heavier than it should. Mike shifts awkwardly in the background, sensing the shift in tone, then quietly excuses himself, stepping outside, leaving the two of them in a space that suddenly feels smaller, more focused. Charlotte exhales slowly, her shoulders lowering just a fraction. "What are you trying to prove?" she asks, the question softer now, less like a challenge, more like an invitation. Ethan pauses just for a second, then shakes his head. Slightly, "Nothing," he says, and that word lands in a way she does not expect, because in her world, everyone is proving something every second, every move, every decision. She looks around the garage, the worn tools, the faded walls, the quiet order of a life built without spectacle. "You could have asked for anything," she says almost quietly. "Money, connections, anything." Ethan lets out a small breath. Not quite a laugh, more like recognition of a truth that does not belong to him. "And then what?" he asks, finally turning to face her fully, his voice still calm, but firmer now. "I would owe you something, you would expect something, and this would not be what it was." He gestures lightly between them. Not dramatic, not heavy, just honest. Charlotte's gaze drops for a moment, her fingers brushing against the edge of her sleeve, something shifting inside her, something unfamiliar. "You think everything comes with strings," he adds, not accusing, just observing. She looks back up, meeting his eyes, and for the first time, there is no defense in her expression, just truth. It always has, she admits, the words quieter than anything she has said so far. The garage falls into a deeper silence then, not empty, but full, like something is being understood without needing to be explained outside. A car passes, gravel crunching. The world continuing as it always does, but inside, something has slowed. Charlotte takes another step, stopping just short of where he stands. "Then let me do this differently," she says, her voice steady but softer. "Let me thank you." Ethan studies her for a moment, not impressed, not skeptical, just present. "You already did," he replies, and that answer is not dismissive. It is final, like a door gently closing. Charlotte's lips part slightly, as if to argue, but the words do not come, because for the first time, she is not negotiating, not persuading, not leading. She is simply standing there, and that is new, that is unfamiliar, that is real. The silence stretches, but it is no longer uncomfortable. It is something else entirely, something that does not need to be filled. And in that quiet space, Charlotte Hayes begins to understand that kindness given without expectation does not ask to be repaid. It only asks to be respected. And for the first time in a long time, she does not reach for control. She simply listens. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is walk away without needing to win. The voice settles gently as the afternoon light shifts through the dusty windows of the garage, stretching long shadows across the concrete floor. And Charlotte Hayes stands there, still caught between two worlds, one she built and one she does not yet understand. Ethan has already turned back to his work, the quiet rhythm of his hands steady again, like the conversation has already ended for him, like nothing needs to be added. "So that is it?" she asks after a moment, her voice softer now, not demanding, just searching. Ethan glances up briefly. "That is it," he says, simple, grounded. Charlotte lets out a slow breath, her eyes moving around the garage once more, taking in details she would have ignored before. The worn toolbox, the faded photographs pinned to a corkboard near the wall. One of them catching her attention, a small girl, maybe 8 years old, smiling with a kind of joy that does not need explanation. "Your daughter?" she asks, stepping closer, her tone almost careful. Ethan follows her gaze, and something shifts in his expression, subtle, but unmistakable. "Yeah," he replies, his voice carrying a quiet warmth that does not need to be explained. Charlotte studies the photo for a second longer. "She looks happy," she says, and Ethan nods once. "She is," he answers, and there is no hesitation in that. No doubt, just certainty built on something deeper than comfort. Charlotte turns back to him, her posture softer now, less guarded. "You do all of this for her?" she asks, and Ethan shrugs lightly. "I do what needs to be done," he says, then adds after a beat. "That is enough." The words settle into the space between them. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady, like a truth that does not need to prove itself. Charlotte looks at him differently now, not trying to measure his value, not trying to understand his status, but trying to understand his choices. And for the first time, she realizes something that unsettles her in the quietest way, that he is not lacking anything, not in the way she assumed, not in the way her world defines it outside. The wind brushes lightly against the open garage door, carrying the distant sound of a passing train, slow, steady, constant. Charlotte folds her arms loosely, not defensive, just thoughtful. "In my world," she begins, then pauses, choosing her words more carefully than usual. "People do not stop unless there is something to gain." Ethan wipes his hands again, leaning slightly against the workbench, listening, not interrupting. "And if they do," she continues, her voice quieter now, "it usually comes with a cost later." Ethan nods once like he understands the statement, but does not accept it as universal truth. "That sounds exhausting," he says simply, and that lands harder than any argument. Charlotte lets out a small, unexpected laugh, the sound brief but real. It is, she admits, the honesty coming easier now. The silence that follows is different again, not heavy, not uncertain, but grounded, like something has been placed where it belongs. Charlotte takes a step back, glancing toward the door, the world she came from waiting just outside. Structured, predictable, powerful, but suddenly distant. "I should go," she says, her voice steady, but not rushed. Ethan nods, not asking her to stay, not offering anything more, just accepting the moment as it is. "Take care," he says, and there is no hidden meaning in it. No expectation, just a simple wish. Charlotte pauses at the doorway, her hand resting lightly against the frame, looking back at him one more time. Not as a stranger now, but not yet, as something defined, and for a brief second, neither of them speaks, because sometimes the most honest connection is not built through words, but through the quiet understanding that nothing needs to be added. And as Charlotte Hayes steps out into the fading light, she carries with her something she cannot quantify, something she cannot buy, something she cannot control. And for the first time, that does not feel like a loss. Some choices do not make sense until you feel what they cost you to ignore. The voice carries softly as evening settles over the city, the skyline glowing in golden glass while traffic hums far below, and Charlotte Hayes stands once again inside her penthouse. But something about the space feels different now. The same marble floors, the same floor-to-ceiling windows, the same quiet luxury that once felt like control, but tonight it feels distant. She sets her keys down without looking, her heels slower as she walks across the room. Not rushed, not driven, just present in a way she has not been in years. Her phone vibrates on the table. Once, then again, then a third time, messages stacking, decisions waiting, expectations calling her back into the world she knows. She picks it up, glances at the screen, then places it back down without answering, and that simple act feels heavier than any deal she has ever closed. "You canceled 3 meetings today." Her assistant's voice echoes faintly from a voicemail notification. The board is asking for confirmation. Charlotte exhales slowly, her gaze drifting out over the city lights. Millions of lives moving in patterns she once controlled, And yet all she can think about is a quiet garage miles away, a man who did not ask for anything, did not expect anything, did not need anything from her, because someone should. She whispers again, the words no longer foreign, but still unfamiliar. She walks to the window, resting her hand lightly against the glass, the cool surface grounding her as her reflection looks back, composed as always, but softer now, less guarded. This is not logical, she says under her breath, almost like she's trying to convince herself. This is not how this works. But even as she says it, she knows something has already shifted, because logic would have kept her in that boardroom. Logic would have kept her from driving out there. Logic would not be standing here, questioning everything that once felt certain. Across town, the garage lights flicker as the day winds down. Ethan Cole pulls down the metal door halfway, the sound echoing briefly before settling into quiet. The air cooler now, carrying the faint scent of evening. He checks his watch, then reaches for his keys, his movements steady, routine, unchanging. But as he steps outside, locking the door behind him, he pauses for just a second, his eyes drifting toward the road. Like something lingers there, not expectation, not curiosity, just a quiet awareness that something has shifted, even if he does not name it. A small car passes, headlights sweeping across the lot, then disappearing into the distance. And he exhales softly, shaking it off, returning to what he knows, what he trusts, what has always been enough. Back in the city, Charlotte turns away from the window, her decision forming not in urgency, but in clarity. She picks up her phone again, scrolling. Past the messages, past the missed calls, stopping on one contact, her driver. She presses call, waits, her voice calm when he answers. I need you in the morning, she says, no hesitation, no second thought. We are going back. There's a pause on the line, brief but noticeable. Back where? He asks, and Charlotte closes her eyes for just a second, not searching, not questioning, just knowing, to the place where nothing needed to be explained, she replies. And as she ends the call, the room falls quiet again, but this time, the silence does not feel uncertain. It feels like direction, like the beginning of something she cannot measure, but finally understands she does not need to control. Sometimes the second meeting is not about finding someone again. It is about finally seeing them clearly. The voice moves gently as the morning sun stretches across the quiet roadside, lights spilling over the same small garage, the same gravel lot, the same place that does not change for anyone. And yet today, something feels different. A black sedan pulls in slowly, tires crunching softly as it comes to a stop. The engine fades into silence, and Charlotte Hayes sits for a moment before stepping out. No hesitation this time, no adjustment, just a quiet certainty in her movement, her heels meeting the ground with a softer sound than before, like even she has changed the way she walks into this world. Inside, Ethan Cole is already at work, the rhythm of his hands steady, the radio low, the air carrying that same mix of oil and warmth. You are back, he says without turning, like he already knew. Like her presence does not surprise him, Charlotte steps further inside, a small breath leaving her, as if something settles just by being there. I said I would be, she replies, her voice calm, no longer testing, no longer guarded, just honest. Ethan straightens, wiping his hand slowly, turning to face her, and for a brief second, neither of them speaks because something unspoken has already been acknowledged. Car running okay? He asks, simple, practical, and she nods, a faint smile touching her lips. Perfect, she says, then adds after a beat. Thank you again. Words land differently this time. Not as a transaction, not as an obligation, but as something meant, something felt. Ethan nods once, accepting it without making it bigger than it is. Good, he says and returns to his work, but Charlotte does not leave. She does not step back toward the door. Instead, she looks around again, slower this time, noticing the detail she missed before, the small lunchbox on a shelf. A child's drawing taped beside it, bright colors, uneven lines, a sun that is too big for the sky. She made that, Charlotte asks softly, stepping closer to the drawing. Ethan glances over, and again, that quiet warmth returns. Yeah, he says, she likes to draw before school. Charlotte studies it for a moment longer, something in her expression softening even further. It is honest, she says, And Ethan gives a small nod. Kids usually are, he replies. Charlotte turns back to him, her posture relaxed now, her presence no longer filling the room, but fitting into it. I have a meeting later, she begins. Then pauses, as if the words no longer carry the same weight. But it can wait. Ethan raises an eyebrow slightly, not impressed, not questioning, just observing. Things usually do not wait in your world, he says, and Charlotte lets out a small breath, almost a laugh. Maybe that is the problem, she answers, and the silence that follows is not awkward, not uncertain, but comfortable, like two people standing in the same space without needing to define it. Outside, a breeze moves through the open door, light shifting across the floor, carrying the quiet hum of a town that does not rush, does not demand. Charlotte takes a step closer, stopping just beside the workbench, not crossing a line, but no longer standing apart. Can I stay for a bit? She asks, her voice softer than it has ever been, not asking for permission the way she once did, but offering the question with respect. Ethan looks at her for a moment, really looks this time, not at her clothes, not at her presence, but at her. And then he nods, once simple, sure, he says, turning back to his work. And just like that, without ceremony, without conditions, Charlotte Hayes, who owned more than most people could imagine, finds herself standing quietly in a small garage, not leading, not controlling, just being, and for the first time, that feels like enough. In the end, the rarest kind of power is the one that chooses to stay gentle. The voice settles into the quiet as the morning slowly unfolds inside the garage, time moving without urgency, without pressure, and Charlotte Hayes stands there longer than she planned, longer than she would have allowed before, watching Ethan work, not with fascination, not with confusion, but with a kind of calm she has never associated with herself. You do not rush, she says after a while, her voice soft, almost thoughtful. Ethan shrugs lightly, tightening one last bolt before setting his tool down. Rushing usually means you miss something, he replies, simple, steady. Charlotte nods slowly, absorbing the words, not as advice, but as something deeper, something lived outside. The sound of a car, doors slamming echoes briefly, followed by small footsteps approaching, quick, light, and full of energy. Dad, a young voice calls out, and a little girl appears at the entrance, backpack slightly oversized, hair catching the sunlight, her eyes bright with something pure and unfiltered. Ethan turns immediately, his entire posture shifting in a way Charlotte has not seen before, softer, warmer, fully present. Hey kiddo, he says, a faint smile breaking through, the kind that does not need to be shown to be real. The girl runs up to him, stopping just short, glancing curiously at Charlotte. Who is she? She asks, her voice innocent, direct. Ethan looks at Charlotte for a brief second, then back at his daughter. A friend, he says simply, and the word hangs in the air, unexpected, unearned, yet somehow true. Charlotte feels something shift inside her, something quiet but undeniable. She offers a small smile, lowering herself slightly to meet the girl's height. Hi, she says gently. I am Charlotte. The girl studies her for a moment, then smiles back. Easy, unguarded. I am Lily. She replies, like introductions do not need more than that, like. People do not need titles to matter. The three of them stand there for a second, the space filled not with tension, but with something lighter, something real. Ethan reaches for the lunchbox on the shelf, handing it to Lily. Did you finish your drawing? He asks, and she nods enthusiastically, pulling a folded paper from her backpack. I made a new one, she says, opening it carefully, bright colors, uneven shapes, but full of life. It is us, she adds proudly, pointing at three stick figures. One taller, one smaller, and one in between. Charlotte looks at it, her breath catching slightly, not because of the drawing itself, but because of what it represents, something she has spent years building without ever truly having. It is beautiful, she says softly, and Lily beams. You can keep it, she offers without hesitation, and Charlotte hesitates for the first time, not out of doubt, but because she understands the value of something given freely. She takes it carefully, like it matters, because it does. Thank you, she says, her voice quieter than ever. And as she stands there, Holding a simple piece of paper in a place that does not measure worth in numbers, something becomes clear in a way it never has before. That kindness does not announce itself. It does not compete. It does not demand to be seen. It simply exists, steady and quiet, and changes everything around it without needing permission. Ethan glances at her, then at the drawing in her hands, then back at his daughter. And for a moment, no one speaks because there is nothing to add, nothing to prove, nothing to explain. And in that silence, surrounded by ordinary things and honest people, Charlotte Hayes, who once believed the world moved because she pushed it, finally understands that the most meaningful things in life move without force at all. And for the first time, the room does not need to react. It does not need to applaud. It simply becomes still, and that silence says everything.